And we are live. Good evening, everybody. Everybody here in attendance and everyone watching online. We just watched a powerful film, Gaza, Human Shields, by Ashraf, Mashharawi. But let me quickly introduce everybody. My name is Mohammed Hashim. I'm a journalist and presenter with Middle East Eye. I'll be moderating this discussion today about the film, and we will be opening up the floor for a Q&A for the audience here in attendance, as well as the audience watching virtually. And let me quickly reintroduce our distinguished guests. We have Ashraf Mashharawi, who's the filmmaker behind Gaza, Human Shields, and he's an international award-winning Palestinian filmmaker from Gaza. And we also have Naji Tamimi, who is a London-based producer for Al Jazeera's investigative unit. He has about 17 years of experience in television, and he was the commissioning producer that worked on the film when it was produced. So welcome both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Ashraf, I want to start with you. Gaza Human Shields, where did you begin with this film? How did you approach this story?
Okay. سؤال ممتاز وجيد. الصوت أتمنى يكون واضح.
This is a good question. I hope that this is clear enough. So it started partially personal and partially professionally. Personally, when we were in Gaza, and Israel claims and alleges that it uses us as human shields, especially by the resistance in Gaza. So my personal question to me was, really, we don't know. Is it true? How can we really distinguish ourselves? Are we really human shields or not? How are we classified in this regard? So that was on the personal question. On the professional question, and part of the certificates that you've seen, part of these is that these testimonies were documented during war for people who were used as human shields. So we got their testimonies, and we got really confused where to begin. Who is using the other as a human shield? Are Palestinians using Israelis as human shields, or vice versa? After the end of the war, we started to search and to dig in, and found that there's a different narrative. We saw that they claim that we're used as human shields. So I started to ask people, any of you was used as human shields? Have you seen resistance in this? Any of them? They haven't even met with people who were resisting. Then why were your houses bombed? That was a question that nobody knew an answer for. Even some of the houses that were bombed, maybe some of the family had some relation with someone who does resisting acts. So they would use that person as a human shield. That's not true, and it's not correct. That's why I needed to understand the real narrative about human shields, and why is Israel using this policy? Why are they bombing schools? Why are they bombing and knocking down the houses?
And Naji, if I pass this to you, but from a different perspective, I mean, how did you see this story or this pitch from a commissioning viewpoint?
احنا كنا بالنسبة لنا كان موضوع
To us, that was very different. It was raising awareness of the audience, of those who see what we do. People in Gaza are Palestinians, and we wanted others to learn what's happening there. So what Ashraf did is, he's a Gazan. He's there. He knows it well. He's lived it. He knows it better than others. So when we used to work together on stories that are related to Gaza and to Palestine, he was himself a live case. And as you've seen in that documentary, the filming was done right after the shooting was done right after the end of the war, and Ashraf used to communicate with us constantly, give us ideas, and the moment we'd feel that Gaza is about to get into trouble, we'd learn more. And this has given us the opportunity to access things to people. And okay,
you're talking about how it's unique because Ashraf is from Gaza. And that's actually a point that I want to touch on, because I don't think a lot of people understand what it is like to be a journalist from Gaza. One of the scenes from the film that really, left a mark in me was when there was shelling going on. This was 2014. There was shelling going on, and you were basically filming people knocking on doors, yelling, and then there's shelling in the background, and you can't really see. There's a whole bunch of dust and all that. So there's all that going on, and yet there's you basically trying to convey what's happening. You're telling us the story. Now, how do you balance that out? Because you're right in the middle in what's happening. So how do you balance it out between telling the story to the audience, but also making it out alive? I think that's a balance that not a lot of people go through.
يعني هي تجربة صعبة لا شك إنك
It's different. It was difficult. We're part of the story. At the same time, we're conveying a message. So during wars, there was it's sort of training. Where we got and we accepted the fact that we might be killed. So we just lived by that. And we've seen children being killed. We've seen women, elderlies. And then we'd forget about ourselves, and then I'm thinking about myself until the last minute. I know that many journalists have fell down. They were killed while holding their cameras, while still shooting. So this is something significant. We have this sense of belonging and this strong belief that this message must be conveyed regardless.
Where do you feel you get that purpose from? I'm going to get to Naji in a bit, but the idea that you're saying that this message has to get to the world, no matter what the price is. Where do you feel this comes from? Is it just being a Palestinian from Gaza, or is there more to it?
The specialty about Gaza is that as journalists, we are living connected to our community. We know that part of our message is to protect my children. They are going to be victimized. My father, my mother, my neighbor, and my relatives all are victims. That's why part of our motivation in creating these films to convey the picture, to protect ourselves. There's no one else that can convey what's going on to others other than ourselves. This film was produced in 2014. Now the events are the same. Now these events are happening once again. It's the same policy. They are bombing hospitals and houses, or are conveyed into human shields. I had a problem with some of my devices and had difficulties with the voice. A few days ago, I spoke to Dr. Ahmed al-Khalati when the Israelis went into the hospital, the Shifa hospital, when they evacuating the wounded. There was an agreement that the UN would evacuate them on the second day. He told me that we said that we had wounded and we had to evacuate them. You occupied the hospital. You conveyed that into a military point. They refused because when they understood that if they evacuate the wounds and the doctors that the resistance would target this hospital. So they kept the doctors and the patients in there to use them as human shields. In Shifa hospital, there was no armed conflict, but in the other hospital there was a conflict. That's why because they knew that they claimed the hospital the patients and doctors as human shields. They break the devices from the hospital and they withdrew because they couldn't find anything. Eventually, the proofs all indicate that we are being used as a human shields. We have to expose this policy. If we don't do that, no one will know. Because we are there and we know the actual details, we cannot be scared. We can't be afraid because we will all eventually die if we don't do that, if we don't expose their actual intentions. They create the lie and they promote it to the world, and we are killed by this lie. It was really clear. They say that the Palestinians are using their children as human shields. But the truth is that they are using us as human shields. They are using women. I was the first who arrived at the area. They were so scared and they were traumatized. They couldn't understand how, as a huge army, they would detain a 75-year-old to have a human shield. And eventually they would say that the Palestinians are using human shields. We have to expose this fact and act. And I think any journalist would investigate will get to the.
Just commenting on what Ashraf has been saying about the dangers that he's faced in the field or continues to face. How do you approach it when you hear about all these stories, and I'm sure they come to you even behind the scenes and whatnot? How do you approach it, or how does it affect your work, let's say, as a commissioning producer?
بالنسبة لي
Regarding the story or the idea?
The dangers. The dangers?
the dangers.
Yeah.
طبعا
Of course, the majority of the films that we worked with Ashraf, it was hard times. The question was, and this morning, next morning when we call Ashraf, is he going to reply? Is he going to answer? What is this situation? This was a external production, the shooting operation, and then the editing was in another stage. He would send the film in copies in another stage. So when he started filming on land, there was a time gap between that and between the production. But our main concern was his security and safety. We always reminded Ashraf and other directors that the safety of yourself and your crew is more important than the story. But thank God you were safe in all times. And this specific situation, it was very critical. You are talking about Gaza directly after the war. There might be some hidden mines, some undefinited missiles, or some other hazards. We were always remind him that he should maintain his safety.
I want to stay with you, Naji, for a moment here. I want to talk about news coverage and media coverage of this situation generally. Usually as we see each time Gaza gets bombarded by Israeli airstrikes, the Israeli government's accusations, that Hamas uses civilians as human shields, we see how that gets picked up. It gets echoed by Western leaders, and then it gets picked up by mainstream media outlets, and so on and so forth. Now, for what we saw in this film, so we have documented cases of Palestinian civilians saying that they were used as human shields by Israeli forces. Yet, as far as media coverage goes, it's not really equal, is it? Why do you think that is?
هو السبب الأساسي هو اللوبي الصهيوني.
The original reason is the Zionist lobby in the West. They have their own way in lobbying the news agenda, the daily news agenda, and they also the Western media is considering the Arab journalists in a different aspect by the Arab when they produce and their content that they are creating. That's why we are trying to. One of the things that one of the good things that was in the film, it was we wanted to host an Israeli expert who presented the analysis about the concept of the human shield and what they mean. I think eventually in the West, for example, in the mainstream media, when there's something against Israel, they reach a lot. They have a lot of complaints. But when there's something against Palestine or against the Arabs, no one is complaining. I think this is a challenge, also a challenge. That's why there's a necessity to raise awareness, political awareness with the people. And if you see something that you don't like, please call the channel and file a complaint, and vice versa.
Did you want to follow up on that, Ashraf, on that answer?
لا بأكد كلام هو المشكلة.
No, of course, the problem is that there's a lack of media lobbying. Because I worked with Western media foundations, we were struggling to convey correct information. And sometimes we hit hard with the lobbying. For example, something I've faced in 29 when I was covering for the Channel 4. We were in a Rimal area. It's a good place in Gaza. My father was a very famous doctor. My youngest brother, he was 11 years old, and my cousin, they were 14 years old. They were playing on the house roof, and they were bound by a missile, and my cousin was killed, and my brother was shredded and was bleeding hardly. And they called me. They told run to catch your brother. He was in a hospital. Of course, I carried my brother. He martyred. I carried him to the house, and we buried him in the cemetery. And I was surprised. I was surprised then, but I was working with the 4th channel and the CNN. The 4th channel was okay with that, but the CNN, the Zionist lobby, pressed, and they said that I faked my brother's death, so that to create solidarity. You can see how extent there's a lack of humanitarian. I wanted to have a declaration. You are insulting me. My brother was killed, and I wanted when they wanted me to say that I'm fabricating the death of my brother. One of the producers, they had an expert with imaging, but the point is the media lobbying converted an actual victim into a falsified story. At the end, the expert apologized and said that the imaging were genuine. The idea is that the Zionist lobbying and the Israeli lobbying, they have a huge role, an unethical role in conveying the lie into truth. And unfortunately, so many media foundations yield to this lobbying. And I work with some Western media, and I witnessed so many falsifications that took place. And of course, other colleagues were also witnessed. Unfortunately, it's an awareness for humanitarian promoters. They have to work in a humanitarian aspect to restore humanitarian aspects to these cases. So as a human, as people from the West are all of us, we have to balance. We have to retrieve humanity into the situations that's going on. At the beginning of the war, there was a conference, and they said that these are human animals. They refer to Palestinians as human animals, and this is how they treated our people in Gaza. This is the concept that they are using. Let me add last words. This film was produced in 2014. How come that we are displaying it today, viewing it today? Because who practiced these criminals and said these lies, and they felt they are away from being held accountable. That's why they are repeating. They are sabotaging schools. They stay in the UNRWA schools. They made it. They militarized the schools and the hospitals. Now they are conveying civilian centers into military centers, and this is really clear. At the beginning, they had some concern for the law, but now they don't. Now they think they are immune from being held accountable because nobody can stop them now, and they will continue doing that. This will be a bad role model for other militaries to repeat these genocides. Now you are silenced to what's going on in Gaza. There are other examples that can happen in other places. I wish this will not be repeated. I know how hard the price will be paid by civilians, but we need everybody to have an actual movement in order to prevent that from happening again in some other place.
I just want to remind our audience we will be doing a Q&A just shortly, so make sure you have your questions ready. I want to end on this question, and you touched on it just a little bit now, Ashraf. So this film, you started working on it in 2014. Now, obviously, with everything that's going on, Gaza is under Israeli bombardment. It's been under Israeli bombardment for 50 days or more. And then there was this temporary truce that collapsed. And now we're just back again. So how does it feel for both of you watching this film now after nearly a decade from when it was produced? I can start with, actually, I'll start with Naji, and then I'll go to Ashraf.
مشاهدة الفيلم
Film now, with what's going on now, I feel so proud and sad at the same time. I'm proud because we produced this film and we were able to provide a document for the history to explain what is human shields. And when you watch the movie, you feel that the film is produced now. I feel sad because I realize that the situation of Gaza now is much worse from what's been viewed in that film. The images that we saw is nothing compared to what's going on now in Gaza. I wish safety to our people in Gaza, and I think we will continue doing our part of the job. Yeah. I think this movie would answer simply. If anybody wants to understand, only watch this movie. If you want to understand the concept of human shields, I think this film explains it very well. I think it might affect the judiciary personnels. I think it's a good tool for them to understand deeply this concept and move quickly towards any investigation and to provide any help to protect the lives of people in Gaza. I'd like to add that in the movie, there was a bunch of clips for the Israeli Army Defense Army. They promote that Hamas is using Palestinians as a human shields. One of the image was a street that was filled with cars. I don't know if you were noticed. One of the cars had the plates was from Egypt. So if someone fabricating, it's them. Now this is the role of fact checkers. They have to. Back then, the fact checking was not very invested in, but now I think we have a good system and a network of journalists that can work in that aspect.
Okay, thank you both. On that note, we are ready to take audience questions. So, yes, do we see a bunch of hands? We do see a bunch of hands. Yes, sir, in the front here. This does not have to be in English, by the way. Just.
أول شيء أحمد الواسع من اليمن.
Ahmed Rassam from Yemen. I salute you a lot. Actually, there's nothing that can be said to describe what you do. You're recording history. And we're proud to be meeting with you, to be dealing with you. We pray for you. But I have a question related to this film. Have you seen any reaction from the West after this? That was my after this for this film. That was my first question. Were there any organizations or others, civil society organizations, who got interested in this film? Well, regretfully, this film is not only that we needed. Actually, yeah, there were suits, lawsuits that were filed against us due to this film. Israel, as you know, is always protected. There's this impunity that Israel enjoys. So regretfully, we're reliving the reality because the film did not succeed in standing in the face of such cases, even legally. And those groups who work legally or start to endorse our position. I would like to say that we've seen what the consequences, just as happened in 2014. This is a soft version of what had happened. In 2014, it was a soft version, but now it's hell. And I would like to mention one important point. Israel tries to show that when they use the human shields, actually they used our buildings, hospitals, they turned them into human shields. And so there's the warriors who are legally one can kill them because they are warriors anyway. But the biggest percentage of killed, the biggest numbers who exceeded 10,000, 15,000 martyrs are civilians. How did they justify their killing? It's that they turned them into human shields. In the previous war, when they would take one building as a human shield, there are certain restrictions. There are certain rules that they need to abide by to or to revert to. For instance, they claim that there was shooting from that home, or they were attacked. And there were hostages. So it's a sequence of things. How did they make a detour, or how they justify all this? They've come up with a policy, which is they would hit a missile on the rooftop of a house, and it's like it makes a big sound. And sometimes, of course, there are victims. So people used to know that this house would be bombed, and then they would run away. But then why? But they never knew why it was bombed. But anyway, they would run away. So once they hit that house, the number of casualties were minimal because people would be evacuated anyway. But now, without warning, without any alarms, anything, they would bomb them while people are still in, without sending them any notifications or warnings. And people then they knew that they would not, in the previous war, they knew that they will not be bombed, they would not be turned into victims. But now they annulled all this. Now they hit homes with people who are still in. And I know, like, there are, for instance, the neighbors who used to live in our neighborhood, the Skake family, for instance. They used to live in one building. The family, the grandparents, the parents, and the grandparents and the grandchildren, they're all gone. And they never had anything to do with politics. They're very, very simple, naive people. They were shelled, and they're gone. So bombing such homes and buildings with this big amount of bombings is horrendous. And people started to look for a building of 14 story building would be leveled with the ground. So even this policy of hitting the roofs has changed. Now, no warnings, nothing. They would just shell them, and the buildings would be knocked
Gentleman
down.
in the back in the red. We also are getting questions from online viewers from Zoom, so I'll be getting to those in just a second.
تحية طيبة.
Anas Hnadi from Morocco, from Anas from Morocco. Thank you very much for your film, and we really salute you, and we show you our solidarity. I have two questions. The first is related to selecting the language. Mr. Naji said that the objective, the final objective of all this is to raise awareness the community, people, especially the internal community. So on what basis did you choose why did you choose the English language? And my second question, it's related to selecting why did the director you focused on, or your focus group was university degree holders? University degree holders, like sometimes one of them gets so enthused and then so he gets two certificates. So that is there an idea behind this? Why did you select this focus group? Or it was just by coincidence? My final question is related to the perspective of a director. Usually, a director would have a broader idea of one thing more than others. Have you found yourself in a position where it was maybe somehow embarrassing or conflicting because the viewer did not, or the audience did not give you required or requested information, and although you know everything?
Okay, so the first part was about language in the film, the choice of it being presented in English.
هو للتوضيح
this film was produced by English channel of Al Jazeera, speaking in English, in Arabic. So the original version of this film is in Arabic, and all that you've seen is in English was duplicated. But for logistics reasons, for this forum, we had to present only the English version for Al Jazeera channel, but on YouTube you will find the Arabic version, original version of it. As for the testimonies, collective testimonies in our films, we usually were keen or make sure that there is this humanitarian feeling, this dramatic feel. Even if it was a documentary, we would introduce something. It's like storytelling. So the idea that they'd be sitting together, sharing their testimonies. It was a sort of the way, a nice way, attractive way of storytelling. My policy is usually that I so that I'm known for this method. I always try to convey the picture as is, the reality as is. The two things, big things that I've seen were there, and they were one case, and they're there. Why should I separate them? So I would bring the two testimonies together. I would record the scene as is, and at the end they would see. So this is the case that they were in. Why should I change it? My job is to convey what's happening in as is. You've seen that the father was there, and then you've seen that the uncles were with them. But actually, so the family was together. They were gathered together. They were all taken as human shields, and then they've taken the men and distributed here and there. So what we've seen in the testimony just as happened. Nothing has changed. I did not intervene here. Even a few hours ago, Naji and I were discussing something about shooting, and we thought that we will do this scene, and then, like for instance, we were taking the right stand, but then we saw that things were on the left side, so we changed. And we were flexible, and we were following the reality, and I think this is professionalism. And this is how we gain the trust of audience. So even in these small details, we are interested. So we are reflecting what's happening in reality. That person was with the other at the end, this film. And maybe now this film maybe does not have any big impact, but maybe one day it will be checked, it will be looked upon. And I believe if this film wasn't here, if we haven't seen this film, would we have understood what's happening now? But because part of this film was shot before the war and during the war, and I'm sure that if we change the dates, And for now, everybody would believe in it because they're the same policies. So we're conveying reality and just preserve it. Part of our history is this. Just as happened with the pharaohs. So we're just these are documents, important documents for people, and even if we talk like this is the transformational justice. It states that injustice should be documented in order to be so that lessons would be learned, so that wouldn't be repeated, and that people would know about that. And this is a bad deed that had happened, and we need to make sure that it's documented, and it's documented for history. It's ready for people to go back to it, and that's why, and that as we've seen, we feel this is the originality of where crisis had started. It has not started just now. Palestinian people are paying this price for being human shields, and they've been so since 1948, since 75 years. They're still paying this price, and innocent people are the ones praying it. Well, this is not only used in Gaza, it's also in the West Bank a week ago in Jenin, and for sure they're still using human shields.
All right, I'm gonna just 1 second. I'm gonna get to questions. I just want to get a question from the online viewers here. So we have a question from Muna to Ashraf, and she's basically asking you if you can tell her about the team that you worked with on the film, as well as the conditions that you were in.
طبعا الظروف صعبة جدا.
The situation was really difficult. We said that the team almost lost their lives. In each war, we have 4 teams that give different shots. Some of the films was filmed. One of the teams were the first who arrived to a specific house that was just bombed, and we were the first to arrive there. Because during a crisis, people try to, like civilians, they try to gather together and help each other. And so our team arrived there, and they were traumatized, and I told them to film that. Sometimes our team could be a human shield also. It was a real situation, but we are trained. This is our occupation. This is our craft. We are trained how to deal with these crises better than civilians. Security methods, we have more than civilians. We try to provide the information in a professional way. Some of the testimonies were taken, like the testimony of Abu Rida, because he was a child. We took his testimony. It was after the war, because we started to reach for more testimonies. It was a really hard road. But regardless whether it was hard or easy, even when you work in different files, different situations, you would face different kind of hazards, and you always try to reduce the risks.
Thank you, Ashraf. I'm aware of the time here. We actually have time for just one more question, one last question. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
شكرا. Thank you.
ربيعي من العرب الجديد. I have no question. I think there was some answering to some questions that were presented in the film. Why this bombing was for civilians and unarmed people. There were no insurgents from Hamas. There was also another film that was made with interviews with previous Israeli officers, military officers. They were talking about the policies in Gaza regarding of the large numbers of the martyrs, and they said that there are tactical and military targets. One of the targets was of force that they are targeting specific locations to have public pressure on Hamas to urge them to surrender. There's another objective as also the targets that also the houses that may contain some of the resistance. This is a new model that they are trying by gathering locations via following up mobiles or telephone calls. If there's a building, like a specific floor that might have an association office, a humanitarian, it could be connected with Hamas. It also be targeted and the surroundings as well. This is the reason what, of course, we understand there's an idea of vendetta, and the investigation would bring up more understanding to what's going on, and that why the Israelis are using this kind of force, and they are targeting civilians. Basically, this was the first time to be stated by Israeli officers.
Thank you. Final words.
لا هو تعليقا عليه لا هو
I have to comment. He is talking about an investigation that was in 2010, like 13 years ago. The Israeli weapons are very precise. They can bomb a specific floor in a building, and they kill everyone in that floor without demolishing the whole building. They can target with high precision, but they they intend to make a huge damage that would make a psychological reaction with people and make them pay the highest price. It's the same policy. This is a well-known Israeli policy, and they are proud of it, clearly proud of it.
Thank you very much. And that is all the time we have tonight. Thank you all in attendance. I want to thank our guests. I want to thank Ashraf Mashharawi and Naji Tamimi. Thank you so much. It was very enlightening and appreciated this discussion. Thank you all. Thank you.